You launched Thrive 5 years ago, and now you have huge businesses, including Pfizer and beyond, that are using your products. How has the pandemic impacted the trajectory of Thrive?
So, Emily, it has been a huge accelerant because when we launched 5 years ago yesterday, we launched with the mission of ending the stress and burnout epidemic. Now, not a lot of people were talking about burnout in 2016. Now it's everywhere because companies have recognized the connection between burnout, mental health problems, attrition, the great resignation, productivity. So these issues are no longer kind of warm and fuzzy benefits, but strategic priorities, both for HR departments and for the C-suite as a whole.
How long do you think this great resignation will drag on? And what do you think the ultimate result will be?
Well, what we are finding with many of the multinational companies we're working on, whether it's Accenture or Pfizer or Walmart, is that the great resignation is not just about burnout. It's about two other things, Emily. It's about working mothers who are having a much harder time, especially during the pandemic, of managing children at home, educating them, and work. And also, it's about a larger reevaluation of what matters to people. We had assumed that it's just the career ladder and money. And now people are saying, maybe not. In the presence of an existential threat like the pandemic and so many deaths, people are choosing other things. We have a lot of people who are leaving more lucrative jobs to go be teachers or do things that are more meaningful to them. So that's another component of the great resignation. I think that's going to be ongoing. That's why we highly recommend at Thrive that companies do an entry interview. You know, we talk a lot about exit interviews. We recommend an entry interview. And the first question is, what's important to you outside of work? So employees feel they can bring their whole selves to work. And also they feel that they can express themselves about what matters to them.
An entry interview, that actually makes a lot of sense. You know, I recently sat down with Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet. Google has committed to allowing its employees to work in a hybrid mode for the long term. And I asked him, really, is this forever? Take a listen to what he had to say.
So we're giving people choice to move anywhere in the world. 4 weeks they can work from anywhere. Mm-hmm. We're going to accommodate 20% of our workforce to be remote over time. So we're going to embrace that flexibility. And
forever?
Forever, yeah.
You know, I got some feedback on that remark because there's still a lot of uncertainty, even at Google, about whether they really mean it. And you've got a lot of companies wondering, you know, is this really for good? And you're going to have companies, you know, making some decisions about whether or not to extend this indefinitely or not. How is that impacting the decisions that employees are making and how they are feeling in this time of uncertainty?
Well, that's really a very important question, Emily, because especially now, as we see additional uncertainty with Omicron, what we are experiencing is that employees can easily move into a constant mode of anxiety. And uncertainty can lead to what we call in our mental health program negative bias, where you imagine the worst. So that's why it's very important not just to offer mental health support after people are depressed and anxious, but to go upstream and address stress triggers and prevent them from becoming depression and anxiety. And uncertainty is a big factor here. We developed this program with Stanford based on their latest brain research to identify the stress triggers. And negative bias is one of the primary ones at this time.
You just announced a new suite of products to help fight burnout. Talk to us about that.
Well, the key of these 5 new products we are launching, Emily, is that we found out that we have to meet employees where they are. A lot of these benefits used to be served through an app, you know, expecting employees to download another app, and there is a tremendous amount of app fatigue. So now our goal through these products is to meet people wherever they are. Are you on Slack? We're going to give you nudges and reminders to do something for your well-being and mental resilience. Like resets, which is another one of our products. 60 seconds to breathe, to remember what you're grateful for, to get up and stretch between Zooms, between WebEx or Teams meetings. And all that is really a way to prevent the unavoidable stress of life, especially during this time, from becoming cumulative. The truth, Emily, is that stress is never going to be eliminated, but cumulative stress, which is what leads to depression, anxiety, hypertension, can be eliminated.
You were really at the forefront of calling on people to disconnect from their devices. And I'm so curious what you think of the Facebook files and the whistleblower, Frances Haugen, who actually just testified again before Congress today and talked about what more companies like Facebook could do to help mitigate the impacts of negative impacts of social media and tech addiction on their users. Take a listen to what she had to say.
Facebook knows that people who are suffering from extreme loneliness, isolation, are often the ones that form very intense habits involving usage. We're talking about thousands of pieces of content per day. You could imagine simple things that said, are you going down a rabbit hole? Are you spending 10 hours a day on the system? Facebook could acknowledge this pattern and put a little bit of friction in to decrease these kinds of things, and it would help the most vulnerable users on the platform, but it would decrease their profits.
Arianna, should Facebook do that? Should they put friction into their products to give us a break?
Absolutely, and there should be legislation to make this abuse of algorithms more likely for all companies. But Emily, we are all addicted. And the truth is that it's going to require measures taken by individuals, by parents towards their children. I know your children are still young, but I think creating phone hygiene rules early on is going to become increasingly important. And we are finding with many of the companies we're working on that parents are very worried about what's happening to their children. The fact that they sleep with their phones, that they spend the night TikToking or snapping instead of sleeping. And in fact, we launched a new program called Thriving Kids to help parents deal with what's happening with their children and the increase in depression and anxiety. But Emily, the truth is that if a parent has a child suffering from mental health problems, and a lot of them are exacerbated by addiction to social media and our phones, it's much harder for them to be fully present and productive at work. And that's another thing that companies are beginning to recognize. We just launched a Thriving Kids program with Pfizer, for example, because they had identified this as another new problem that their employees are facing. And that's something very new. You know, in the middle of all the grief and the losses, Emily, something very exciting is happening, which is the most innovative of HR leaders are really responding to what is happening very quickly, literally within weeks of identifying a problem, a loneliness problem, a problem with employees' children, they provide a solution.